These are the iLoud Precision MKII speakers. They're part of a range of speakers. These are the Precision 5s that have been released from IK Multimedia. It's the second iteration of this range of speakers. In this video, I'm going to talk to you about what these are, what's changed, which is not very much, but more importantly, what's changed in the software that comes with these or that accompanies these, which is quite a lot. And then we'll kind of cover what this means for DJs, whether you need this kind of speaker, whether this is something you should be looking at, because they're quite technologically complex. I'm not reviewing them here. As I say, they haven't changed an awful lot, and we've got a really in-depth review, video and written review of the Mark-1s, which talks to you more about the concept, why this kind of speaker exists, what they're good for, and so on. This is just an overview, but we'll start off by looking at what's new about the speakers, then we'll talk about what's changed in the software, and we'll end off by talking about why you might want them as DJs. Right. Let's start off by talking about what's changed on the speakers. As I say, these are the iLoud Precision 5 Mark IIs, which means they've got a 5-inch woofer, a 5-inch main speaker down here at the bottom, and you can get them in different sizes and different permutations. And the point of that is that they are designed to be used in quite a number of different scenarios. So obviously as a DJ, you'd have a couple of these and you'd use them in your studio to make mixes on, maybe produce with and so on. But they're made to be used in bigger studios with Dolby Atmos, where you've got speakers behind you and around you and above you and all that kind of thing if you're mixing for that kind of audio. So they are kind of bigger than just DJing and even bigger than just music production. And so they are designed to kind of fit in all those different circumstances, which brings me on to one of the changes, which is something that is not really applicable to DJs, but worth knowing. These are the mounting holes where you can use them to mount them kind of suspended in air, if you like. As I say, they can be mounted to be speakers that play from above you if you want. These are on the top of the speakers. They've always had mounting options, but now they've got them on the top and the bottom. You might find them just a bit ugly and not want them there. So worth pointing out that they have got mounting holes on the top now as well. So other changes to the speakers compared to before. They've got new tweeter. There's the tweeter. They've got a new tweeter. One of the things that broke on the previous pair, IK Multimedia sent us a replacement. It was our fault, is that we broke the tweeter. They're quite delicate, exposed. There's no covers with these speakers, and we broke one. But they are a little bit less delicate now. They're improved, and more importantly, they sound a bit better. I think they've got graphene in them now, which they never had before. The actual construction of the speakers has always been great. You can see they're a very deep speaker. The construction is fantastic, so there's not much change there, but they do tell us that they've made it even more rigid. Rigid speakers tend to sound better. So a new tweeter, new mounting options, and a new construction internally to make them even more rigid. And they've got a new little symbol down at the bottom here. It says IK rather than iLoud. But really not an awful lot has changed there. But it's worth running over by telling you what's on the back of the speaker, kind of what they do. And so the whole point of this speaker is that it works with software. That's why you've got a USB connector here. It's also, though, why you've got this little XLR connector here, where you would plug an XLR microphone in. They supply the microphone, and you use the microphone to take soundings of your listening environment. So there's two ways that this can be useful to you, or can be used once you've done it. The first way is just plugging in microphones and taking the listening environments characteristics into the speaker, and the speaker can then be tuned. So if you've ever used Sonos or Dirac Live, there's lots of different options out there for tuning your speakers to your room, right? Getting the timing right. In my opinion, in my experience, it makes a lot of difference with the bass, because bass can get quite unruly in rooms that aren't very well sound corrected. And so using speaker tuning, using the DSPs built into the speakers by plugging a microphone into them, or using whatever system they've got. With Sonos, you pick your phone up and you wave it around. I'm sure if you've got those speakers, you've played with that. Then you can get it to sound noticeably better, right? So these speakers have got that built in, and that is what that socket there is for. They come with a microphone, though you will need an XLR cable because they don't provide that. But then you can plug in the software that comes with them. So I'll get onto this again in a second, because they've made some big changes there. That's what that is for. Here's your input. Here's your volume control. Here's kind of standard stuff you get on speakers like this. So you can tune them for the environment. You can tune them if they're on a desk or whatever in a corner. And you can just basically tame the audio here. This is kind of like an EQ section for the speaker. They come individually. They've got their own power supplies, got their own amplifiers. amplification. They're completely independent of each other. This little section here is because you can get a remote control that plugs into the speaker that lets you switch different voicings. I'll talk to you about that again in a second. And so the idea is you plug the remote control into one and you daisy chain using the other socket to other speakers, so the remote control can do more than one speaker. So this USB socket here, this goes into your laptop and this goes into the software that comes with the speakers. And this is where one of the biggest changes are, because they've changed the software. The software used to be, basically there was software for these, and then they had another piece of software if you used their other room correction technology, because they also sell hardware, IK Multimedia, that lets you tune any speakers. And so they had these kind of like two platforms running alongside each other. They've just put them together into one platform, which is called Arc X. And that works with the new speakers and also works retrospectively with the old speakers that work with the old software. This is quite a big change because the software now covers all of their room correction, all of their audio treatment options, and like voicings for other speakers and so on. And so doesn't matter what you're using from this company, you'll use one piece of software. So they've just tried to make that simpler, which makes a lot of sense. That is actually the biggest change going on here. It's software, not hardware. And so the remote control will let you take speaker voicings. So for instance, you can have your speakers tuned to sound like a studio or a car stereo or whatever, and then the little remote control lets you press the buttons. If you want to see all this stuff, by the way, none of it's changed. It's just the software itself that's changed. All the features that I've been talking about are the same, the remote control, the tuning and so on. And so I do go into it in the original review of the Mark I speakers, which is linked underneath here. Do go and watch that if you want some more info about this. So the software's changed a lot. The speakers themselves haven't changed an awful lot, to be honest. They've just updated it a little bit. Why might DJs want this kind of speaker though? Well, if you're worried that your room adds color, if you're worried your room adds unwanted alterations to the sound because it's a weird shape, like for instance my living room at home is very big and echoey, you know, this kind of tuning can't fix, you can't polish a turd, as they say quite uncouthly. It can't fix everything, but it can certainly make a difference. So when you've done what you can with your room, having software to help with the rest, which works with the DSP and with tuning them by plugging them into your software initially, and then the speakers remember all that stuff, is really good. It can help. It can help if you're making mixtapes, making DJ mixes that you really have to get right professionally and that you know are going to be listened to in different environments, because you can kind of test them with different tunings of the speakers to make sure that they sound all right in a simulation of those environments. If you're producing music, then they really do come into their own, because it's very important to have not only a flat frequency response, but a perceived flat frequency response. And again, having DSPs and having a properly tuned room can really help with that. So that's why this kind of speaker could be appealing. I mean, there's two schools of thought on this. The one school of thought is get the most analog, simple speakers you can with a really nice amplifier, great build quality, tune your room properly, and just learn your speakers. You get zero latency, it's simple, there's little to go wrong. But, you know, nowadays speakers can do an awful lot and DSPs can do an awful lot. And this company, to be fair to them, are really bang into that game. You know, they make a lot of equipment, they're spending a lot of money on their software to improve the user experience and improve the audio quality and improve what you can do with it. So look, if you're wanting that kind of thing, and especially, of course, if you're wanting to move up and start messing around with Dolby Atmos and that kind of thing, then it's going to be fantastic for you, because this is a range of speakers that's been designed with all their mounting points and all that kind of thing to work in those environments. For DJs, really, I'd say if you really are into this stuff, if you're into the geekiness of tuning your room, tuning your sound and playing with different speaker emulations, this is a great system, and they've only improved it by making the software better. But the speakers themselves, if you own any of the previous ones, the Mark I's that we've reviewed in full, by literally go back and watch that software if you want to see, watch that review if you want to see me using the remote controls and showing you the way they work. You don't need to upgrade to the Mark IIs. No way. These are an incremental improvement. However, it does show that they're putting their time and money into the ecosystem for people who are into room tuning, into room correction, into speaker emulations and that kind of thing. And some DJs are. I certainly love this kind of thing because I can hear the difference in difficult rooms. My living room at home being a perfect example. So that's an update video on the iLoud Precision range. These are the Precision 5 Mark IIs. Go watch the original again. If you want to learn more about this, do let us know if you've got any questions underneath. And we'll see you again very soon.